Corinthians chapter 7, or on your phone if you want. Let's be looking at the scriptures this morning as we go through this. We are following along Paul's letter to the church of Corinth. And again, we're tracking along with what he's saying. So he's in the middle of answering some questions that they had sent him, and we're going to just continue following his response to them in their situation. And obviously, there's rollover to how that affects us and what that means for our lives. We're going to kind of follow his theme, his argument, all of that this morning. To get us into this, though, we're halfway through chapter 7. Obviously, all the verse numbers, all the chapters, we put those there just to help us navigate. We're in the middle of Paul's letter here. He's been saying stuff, and he's going to say more stuff. What we're going to look at today is following all the other stuff. So let's try to keep that context in mind. With that, last week we looked at the first half of chapter 7. What were Paul's views regarding sexual abstinence? That's what we're spending a lot of time talking about that. What was Paul saying about that? That's obviously what their question was. He said, regarding the question you asked in your letter, yes, it's good to abstain from sexual relations. Then he goes on and says a bunch more. Mark?
If it's good for you, then go ahead. If you're married, make sure you're in a coordination with your spouse. If you're not married and you can't be absent, then get married.
Yeah, right? He's kind of covering the whole game. He's like, hey, if you're married, you've got other people to consider besides yourself. Like, hey, I'm actually good to be absent with the marriage. Like, that's great. There's someone else involved, and you need to be taking them into account. Like, that's a necessity. That has to happen. That's a thing you need to be doing. Married people, you need to be considering your spouse. If you're not married, and you're like, hey, I think I want to go ahead and, I'm going to embrace the life of abstinence. Well, can you? That's something to consider. It's like it's better to, I'll just read it. If you can't, so I say those who aren't married and widows, it's better to stay unmarried just as I am. That's a good thing. That's a great thing. But if they can't control themselves, they should go ahead and marry. It's better to marry than to burn with lust. It's like abstinence is a good, but there's also the realities of life, and you got to square that together to a workable thing. And like Mark said, everyone needs to be evaluating this and assessing this, and carry that over. We're going to get to a really helpful verse today that's like, you need to be assessing your life. You need to be assessing your situation. This isn't just this isn't bumper sticker answers. Oh, here's an answer for you, answer for you. It's like, no, this is stuff to consider. But Paul's saying, let's get into that. Let's get into the nitty gritty. It says in singleness, it's a great asset. Yes, abstinence is a great asset if it can be embraced in purity. And keeping in mind, single and sexually active, Paul would say, is not one of the options. Remember earlier, the passage right before this, he said, hey, the body, you guys say the body, what did they say? I get the two.
The body's made for food.
Yeah, I always mix the two things they were saying together. Food is made for the stomach for food. Yes, that's true, right? We have urges, we have natural human inclinations, yes, but you can't say that our body is made for sexual immorality. It's like, okay, what you can't do, so you could be, really, you should be abstinence within marriage. That's something to really think about because you've got a spouse. If you can live single and be abstinent, that's good. What's not on the table is living single, not being married, and being sexually active. He's like, that isn't an option because that would be sexual immorality. So let's keep that in mind. We'll get into that a little bit more today as well, but that's kind of the boundaries that he's giving there. What is meant by the phrase, I do not have a command from the Lord? Paul says that in 7:12, we looked at it last week. He says, now I'll speak to the rest of you, though I do not have a direct command from the Lord. Mom?
It just means that it isn't something that Jesus actually spoke when he was here on earth.
Yeah, and I say that because the first thing he says, every one of the Gospels, this is like definitely Jesus spoke on marriage. He's like, hey, can I divorce my wife? Every one of the Gospels, except for John, but like the three Gospels that really track with each other, they all say, this is what Jesus said about divorce. So Paul's like, hey, what I have to share with you married people about divorce, we know what Jesus said about that. He said this. Now we're getting to what about a mixed marriage? You've got a believer and an unbeliever marriage. I don't have anything from Jesus' teaching about that. Let me share with you about this. I bring that up because he's going to say it again, right, about this thing. But really it's just, this is kind of new truth, which most of his epistles are, right? Previously unknown is uncommunicated things. That's why he's explaining this to people and writing it out. I'm communicating things that this is church truth. This is new stuff that you guys we didn't have before, so let me address this for you. So far, in our context here, Paul has addressed married people, he's addressed divorced or widowed people, and divorce, the concept within marriage, and mixed marriages. Those are the three things he's addressed so far. Why was he bringing these things up?
Obviously, they were dealing with it.
They're right. He's writing to a specific church. This is stuff that's going on. Like, what do we do in this? We got different thoughts. We've got different relational statuses. We've got different things. Paul, what do we do? So he's like, let me be specific. So he's not just making a bunch of rules and stuff. He's like, hey, let me engage. Let's take the truth of the gospel and engage with your lives, and let me speak truth into this. That's why we're even having this discussion. There's a hand up, too, I think, Mom.
Oh, I think we all probably realize it, but just to clarify that when he talks about when we're talking mixed marriages, we're not talking mixed racial marriages. That's not even a
No, not
thing
at
for him.
all. No,
But mixed, a believer with an unbeliever.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
in the context of America, that's what people think of when you talk about
Sure,
mixed marriages.
yeah, mixed marriages. Hey, what if I'm a Christian but my spouse isn't a Christian? What do I do? He says, well, try to stay, like, as much as you can, live at peace with that person because you're a positive influence in their life. That's the mixed context. Thanks. Yes. Okay, so with that in mind, we're now at verse 25. I'm going to read 25 and 28. I would say last week was pretty heavy on the married side of things. Most of the discussion was about what about married people like this? What about married people like this? What about people who were married but aren't? Very married heavy type of thing. This is going to be the other side now. We're going to get into a lot of single talk. So it all applies. It's all stuff to be thinking about. Verse 25. Now regarding your question about the young women who are not yet married, I do not have a command from the Lord for them. But the Lord, in His mercy, has given me wisdom that can be trusted, and I will share it with you. Because of the present crisis, I think it is best to remain as you are. If you have a wife, do not seek to end the marriage. If you do not have a wife, do not seek to get married. But if you do get married, it's not a sin. And if a young woman gets married, it is not a sin. However, those who get married at this time will have troubles, and I'm trying to spare you those problems. So I just want to get into this. Again, we're just going to follow up what Paul's saying. So it says, hey, you guys... So what about the other translations say, he says, about the young women who are not yet married, the virgins. That's the term. So the virgins is the term that we're talking about. So he's specifically now talking about people who have never been... They're never been married or sexually active. That's what he's saying. What about someone who they never actually engaged with marriage? That's the question that he's dealing with here. What about those people? Paul's response is, your singleness is a treasure and an asset and should not be given up lightly. Which we'll look at as a unique take that doesn't actually fit their culture there. Paul's perspective on this would be kind of new. It would be a uniquely Christian perspective. Your singleness is a treasure and should not be given up lightly. I don't see how we could avoid his perspective on that. The Lord in His mercy has given me wisdom that can be trusted, and I will share it with you. Because of the present crisis, I think it is best to remain as you are. How are they? Well, they're unmarried. Right? We're talking about people, hey, what about someone who's never been married? I think you should stay like that. I think that would be a good thing. He's going to get into his again, he's not giving a law. Oh, someone's unmarried. But now everyone now who's not married can't get married. No, I'm not saying that, but here's some nuance. Here's some perspective to have in here. Things to consider before you just do a knee-jerk, oh, everyone should get married. Paul's like, hold on. There's some things to think about here, because if you're not married, you have options. Will I get married or will I not? If you are married, you don't have options. You're married, and you're locked into that. So he's going to talk about it. First off, though, the New Living Translation says in verse 26, because of the present crisis, I think it's best to remain as you are. That's one of those terms. A little bit difficult because how that gets translated, there's a few ways it could be. So there's a couple options, and there's a range of any of these could be. When it says there's this present crisis, it could be a current specific tribulation. Hey, because of the current specific issues that you guys are having now, I'm saying this. One of the problems with that is the Corinthian church is presented consistently as a church that's not really having trials and tribulations. If you remember in Thessalonica, they were in the midst of persecution. The believers in Jerusalem are in the midst of persecution. The Corinthians later on are going to be talked to like, yeah, you guys are pretty much riding high right now. You guys are prosperous and everything's going good for you. So it's a little bit weird because the rest of the book of Corinthians says they're not really having trials and tribulations. So that's, but it's a possible translation. The word could mean that. Could also be just general hardships of serving the Lord. So the New Living Translation says, because of this present crisis, and it has the note, or the pressures of life would also be a translation that would work. And my Bible has a note that says, yeah, we translate it this way, but also it could just be, because of the pressures of life, I'm saying this. It'd be a more generic thing. The other one could just be imminent troubles. It could be because of the troubles that are near at hand. It would also, the word usage there could mean that. Like, hey, because things are fine now, but because you know trials and tribulations are coming, I say this. Just to, because that's the rationale he uses for this. He's giving his reasoning there. But it really, any of those could be. But what's inescapable is Paul views singleness as a good thing. He's like, for whatever one of those reasons it is, he's like, singleness is a good thing. Singleness is something to be considered as a positive thing in your life. It provides a unique freedom to serve the Lord unimpeded. That's how Paul is viewing this. And something to note with that is that perspective is countercultural to both Jewish and Corinthian cultures. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but like the Jewish culture, present day even, like the Orthodox Jewish culture, they would say, hey, our job, our role here is to be fruitful and multiply. Like, we should get married. Marriage is the expectation for a good Jew. Is going to get married and have children. And if you don't, kind of like some major pressure there. Like the whole Fiddler on the Roof. Everybody's watched that movie, or the concert with the matchmaker. It's like, it needs to happen, right? We need to find a spouse. So the Jews are like, whoa, what do you mean, Paul? You're saying hey, before you get married, maybe don't. What? That's not Jewish. That's not a Jewish thing to say. He's actually pushing, saying, hey, let's not jump into this. Corinthian culture says, you know what? You don't actually, like, marriage isn't that big of a deal because it's actually fine to be sexually active in all these other areas. And that would be secular. Corinthian culture says, yeah, you can have sex in all of these ways. So, sure, you don't need to get married. Paul's like, no, actually, you can't be having sex in all these areas, but also, you don't need to be married. There's benefit here to living a celibate life dedicated to the Lord. But that's not something that either of those groups would be like, oh yeah, Paul took our side. This is a uniquely Christian perspective that he's bringing. This is something that would have stood out to both groups. And Paul's, I would say, pretty hard on it. Like, through this, you're going to see, he says this like over and over and over. This is really good. Like, if you had to pick between the two, which is better? Paul's like, I think this one. And it's singleness. And he's going to make a case for it. But again, in a context. This is in a context, and we want to keep that in mind, because he's not saying this is what everyone has to do all the time, always, because. Not saying that. Singleness with intentionality is a noble pursuit. Paul notes that singleness can be more effective than marriage. And then he says it's not a sin either way, but there are certainly factors to consider in that's the issue. This isn't a right or wrong discussion. But he's like, let's look at the situation here. There are things to be considering here. So I'm going to read a big chunk now, and then we're going to go back through it. And I want you to just try to track with Paul's rationale. But let me say this, dear brothers and sisters. The time that remains is very short. So from now on, those with wives should not focus only on their marriage. Those who weep or who rejoice or who buy things should not be absorbed by their weeping or their joy or their possessions. Those who use the things of the world should not become attached to them, for this world as we know it will soon pass away. I want you to be free from the concerns of this life. An unmarried man can spend his time doing the Lord's work and thinking how to please him. But a married man has to think about his earthly responsibilities and how to please his wife. His interests are divided. In the same way, a woman who is no longer married or has never been married can be devoted to the Lord and holy in body and in spirit. But a married woman has to think about her earthly responsibilities and how to please her husband. I'm saying this for your benefit, not to place restrictions on you. I want you to do whatever will help you serve the Lord best with as few distractions as possible. So there's a lot, but we'll go back through that. The first paragraph there, you can see Paul is presenting an eternal focus. He's like, for everybody, for everyone, all believers, I want to call you guys to not just be thinking about the here and now. If you're married, your whole life is not your marriage and your kids. And I'm going to tack on kids pretty much every time when I say that, because there's no contraceptives aren't a thing back then. When you say a married person, by and large, we're talking married, children follow. That's just like a given. It doesn't need to be stated because that's how life works. Two people get married, and then lots of kids follow. So when he's talking about these obligations that come with marriage, he's not thinking dual income, no kids. That's not how, or that term, we say that now, right? It's not, that just wasn't a thing predominantly back then. So I'm just going to toss it out. Keep throwing that in. Having a discussion here, but he's calling to an eternal focus. Let me say this to brothers and sisters. The time that remains is very short. From now on, those with wives should not focus only on their marriage. And he says there's all these other things that can take our attention. Those who buy things should not be absorbed. Those who weep or who I can't read this. Those who weep or who rejoice or who buy things should not be absorbed by their weeping or their joy or their possessions, right? The things that are going on in your day-to-day life right now, the joyful things, like, man, life is going so well for me right now. It's like, that shouldn't be your focus. Boy, my life really sucks right now. That's also not your focus. Well, I got business, I got stuff going on right now. That's not the focus that I'm calling you guys to. All of you need to be looking past those things and recognizing this time that you have right now is very short. Paul is speaking on both terms. One, we don't know individually how long we have, right? We're just talking. Two people just had their lives snuffed out way before they were planning on it recently. That's for all of us. My life could end whenever. There's that. Paul also very much believes in what he preached in the churches is Christ could come back at any time. He's like, and Paul's expecting it. He's like, I think Jesus ascended to heaven in my lifetime, and Paul is ready for him to come back down in his lifetime. And that's how he presented things to the church. He's saying, hey, we don't know. Guys, it's a short time that we have, either individually or corporately. We need to be living like that. We shouldn't be focusing here. We should be thinking on an eternal level. So don't be thinking about these short-sighted things. The time that remains is very short. Though this world, as we know it, will soon pass away. Right? I want you guys thinking about eternity. For everybody. That's a married or unmarried. It says, knowing that, with that in mind, it's actually going to be more difficult for married folks to keep that perspective. Because married folks have responsibilities and things in their lives that are very much here and now and that demand their attention, rightfully so. Like a husband has to also care for his wife and kids. A single person really has themselves and the Lord. That's who they're engaging with. I'll get to it later on, but maybe I'll just mention now. There's just that reality of, if I'm healthy and I'm doing great, I'm like, oh, here's all these things that I want to do to serve the Lord. I can do that. If my family has the flu and I'm healthy, I'm with my, right? As a good husband and father, I have obligations and responsibilities to care for my family. And Paul's like, yeah. If you were single, you wouldn't have that. He's just stating truth, right? He's not saying this isn't sin, this isn't right, wrong. He's like, let's just look at this objectively. A married person has things that are going to take their attention, rightfully so. A single person doesn't. They can actually dedicate their life 100% just to the Lord. There's that, it comes up, especially when I was newly married. A lot of my peers were still single, and there was that idea of like, for me, just like, oh, I'm just going to go out and I'm going to have these great conversations and these uplifting things with people right through the night into the wee hours of the morning. It's like, that's not yes, and then go home and see how that, oh, where were you? You didn't call, you didn't, as a husband, you don't, it's like, no, you can't just disappear for a couple days and serve the Lord and neglect your, it's like, no, that's not a thing. But then I'd watch, my single friends would do that, and I was just like, oh, wow, that's, really different. They'd be like, oh, yeah, I was up till 2 in the morning last night. I was like, I can't even imagine, that, it's so different. Paul said, yes. There's a freedom that comes with singleness. You're free to serve the Lord, and that shouldn't be diminished. It's like, oh, singleness is just someone who's not married. It's like, no, singleness is an opportunity to serve the Lord, and it's pretty incredible. Actually, in this context, married folks have a bit extra burden here. And he says that I want you to be free from the concerns of this life. Wouldn't that be great? It's like, since he's talking, right? Who's he talking to? People who are unmarried. He's like, oh, yeah, I'm talking to an unmarried group of people. Wouldn't look at what's available to you. Isn't that great? Isn't that unique? Yes, it is. That's what he's presenting. I want you to be free from the concerns of this life. An unmarried man can spend his time doing the Lord's work and thinking how to please him. But a married man has to think about his earthly responsibilities and how to please his wife. A married person's focus needs to be on eternity and service to the Lord, but they have the added concern of the needs of their family. And again, not a good versus bad. It's not which one of these is morally superior. It's like, that's not the case. But there are factors that make these things different and make it worth considering. If you want to think about it, see if this analogy works. Rochelle always gets nervous when I use analogies because they don't always land. But I was thinking, the way that Paul's presenting this, again, not a good versus bad, but a different. If we were to be going on a 3-day hike, it's like we're taking a long hike, like if I were to take a backpack with my supplies, and I've got my 60-pound pack on my back, and it's got my supplies, that's going to make my trip, right? There's benefits to that. Most people who hike will take that backpack because there's benefit. But if Michael doesn't have a backpack, and I do have a backpack, which one of us, objectively, will be able to go faster? Michael. He doesn't have the extra burden. Are there benefits to the backpack? Yes. Are there limitations to the backpack? Yes. He's just acknowledging it. He's like, I, Paul, do not have a spouse, and I'm seeing the benefits of this. It's allowing me to be laser focused and so pursuing the Lord that I know I couldn't do at this level if I were married with children. So he's saying, so you guys who have the option, consider that. Like, because I'm on the threshold of eternity right now. Paul's like, Christ could come back at any time. I could be taken at any time. And with that in mind, I'm like gunning it. I'm like, I want to be as effective as I possibly can. And I have that freedom to be like this. And you said before, I feel like I can do that and function well, and my sex drive is not like holding me back in that. I'm able to be celibate and serve the Lord, and I'm able to function in that, and there are benefits to it. Comparing himself with married people. And he's like, hey, let's not just look past that. There are some legitimate benefits. Marriage has objective limitations to it. Marriage is stupid. No. But it is limiting. Right? There's a limiting factor to it, and benefits. A Christian who is single has a unique and special opportunity and privilege. That's what he presents here. And I want you to notice two things. That what he's describing here is singleness, but the why. He's like, this is why this is should be viewed as a legitimately good thing, is the why. I want you to be free from the concerns of this life. An unmarried man can spend his time doing the Lord's work and thinking how to please him. That was in verse 32. And down in verse 34, a woman who is no longer married or has never been married can be devoted to the Lord and holy in body and in spirit. I want you to do whatever will help you serve the Lord best with as few distractions as possible. Right? Just know the singleness, the intentional singleness that Paul is describing here isn't the benefits. Not I get to do what I want. Right? Yes, singleness is a great opportunity because I don't have to worry about that ball and chain holding me back. Who here's heard of the red pill movement? It's got lots of baggage to it. It's a modern thing. But it would be this type of talk. It'd be like, yeah, guys, don't get married. It's just a burden, right? It's just going to hold you back. Go plant your seed, right? Sow your wild oats. Live this up because you should be able to experience masculinity unbridled. Right? You should go and live your life how you want and have that freedom. It's not what Paul's describing here. He's not saying, the freedom you have is you're as a single person, you're free to express yourself unimpeded. He's like, no, you're free to serve the Lord unimpeded. That's the focus here. He's saying this is what makes it a great thing, is that you have a unique ability to serve the Lord and not have to really be considering people that are connected to you. That's the joy. That's the freedom. Mark, get a comment?
I think it's odd. That's not the message generally, at least in my experience, that you get from church.
Mm-hmm.
The message is strong family values. Family is what you should strive for. You should strive for a spouse and 30 kids and more kids better. And that's what you want in a church, is that strong family values.
Mm-hmm.
And not stay single and serve the Lord,
Mhm.
which is, I mean, obviously contrary to what Paul's advising here.
Yeah, and again, the rationale is a big part of that, because some of what people would say is like, oh, I want to be single, and then you're like, well, what is that? And you kind of like lay out what that single life is, and it's not what Paul's presenting here. It's a life dedicated to service to the Lord. It's like, yeah, I don't want to be married, and then there's all this stuff going on the side, and it's like, okay, that's also not. But no, you're right, I agree. There's a push.
And again, my experience is, other than Paul, I don't know that I've known any single people who chose to be single just so they could focus on their service to the Lord. I'm sure you've been.
I do. I know several. I know.
Obviously,
Yeah.
Maybe Nicole Banta. I don't know if that's why she's single, but
I don't
I know
want to use
she
names
is
here,
definitely
but yeah.
focused and
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I'd say rightfully so, this pushes against the church a little bit. Because it's the rationale that he's
again,
using.
that pressure is, family is what we want.
Yep. And that's what we're going to get to, is a holistic view here. Because what he's really hitting is kind of like what you said earlier is, hey, what is best for you in this situation? And there's nuance to it, but there's also structure and guidelines. Like, oh, if you can pursue a life like this, by all means, do that if that's what's best for you. Or there's like this. This is not okay, and this is not okay, but these things are.
And as long as I'm talking. There's also, and I seem to have this discussion with a lot of people, even aside from service of the Lord, so many married, especially men that I've known, think back on their single days and think, boy, I wish I was single again. And so many single people I know think, man, when am I going to find that special person? And both of them are looking at the other, and there are advantages to both. I mean, you just, whatever you happen to have, be content with that, and don't think that the other person has it better, because they don't. They just have it different.
Which goes back, and we'll be touching on this later, but he said it 3 times in the last batch we looked at. Did I go back too far? Earlier in the sentence, right? Each of you should continue to live in whatever situation the Lord has placed you and remain as you were when God first called you, right? Yes, don't be doing the grass is always greener. If you're married, don't be thinking back in your glorious single days. If you're single, don't be thinking, oh, if only I had a spouse, then I could serve the Lord. Like, no, you can serve the Lord in each of these capacities, but there are pros and cons that are unique to each one. And now he's talked about marriage and how that can work to the benefit and glory of the Lord. And now he's talking about singleness and how this is legitimately an option within some structure here and with some stuff there. But yeah, no, you're right. It pushes back, right? It pushes back against even our current Christian culture to an extent. Paul's not elevating the free expression of self, but he's saying you could be dedicated in service to the Lord in a unique capacity. He's highlighting the ability to be 100% dedicated to the Lord. And remember, all the stuff he's saying about this is why Paul views singleness as, he's like, if I could choose this for all of you, I would choose singleness for this reason. This is the reason. If you're not living single for this reason, then the argument's not there, right? He's not saying, oh, because I don't want the responsibilities of marriage. No, that's not a reason. That's not why singleness is good. Just to keep that in mind, that his argument is based on what he just said there. Why is this something that I want for you? I want you to be free from the concerns of this life and thinking how to please the Lord and dedicated to the Lord's work. That's what I want for you. Singleness definitely offers that in a way that a married life does not. And then verse 35, mark that in your Bible if you want. Pretty much his whole discussion that he's had before this and what's going to follow after it, the crux of that is verse 35. I'm saying this for your benefit, not to place restrictions on you. I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but I want you to do whatever will help you serve the Lord best with as few distractions as possible. Right? There's pros, there's cons. Look at your life, look at your options, say which one of these roles would allow me to best serve the Lord in my context. And it's like, yeah, there's pros and there's cons, and there's you. You're a factor. He said, I wish everybody could be like me, but I recognize everybody has a unique, special gift from God of one kind or another. I get that not everybody can make the single life work. I get that living in abstinence and service to the Lord, not everyone can pull that off. He said, for some people, the temptation is going to be too much, and those guys should just get married. Those people should get married because it's not a winning road for you. But for other people, man, definitely pursue that. So everything we're going to read here, I'm saying this for your benefit, not to place restrictions on you. I want you to do whatever will help you serve the Lord best, with as few distractions as possible. The decision-making process he presents is wholly devoid of doing what makes me happy. Right? He's not saying that. I want you to do what makes you happy. You do you, Corinthians. No, you do what you think would best help you serve the Lord. That's what I want you asking. That's how I want you thinking here. This isn't about you. This isn't about what you want. This isn't about you getting, again, to live out your true self, unhindered, unimpeded. No, that's of little to no consequence here. Actually, it's not about you. It's about Jesus. You should not be living your life based on what you want to do. We should be thinking about what has God want me to do and what would be of benefit to eternity here.
Which is in itself very counterculture to American culture.
That one gets used, that statement, that line of thought gets tossed out pretty flippantly and pretty often of like, here's what I'm doing. Oh, are you? Well, makes me happy. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay then. You're supposed to be like, good for you when someone says that. Well, you know what? It's not for everybody, but it makes me happy. I was like, I don't care. Your happiness, what you want, isn't what I'm talking about here. We're talking about the glory of God and how can I live a life that honors Him and allows me to be of use to Him most effectively. That's the question, not what you're wanting to do.
To agree, I think Paul also makes it very clear. For me, that's working. If it's not working for you, then by all means make yourself happy.
Well,
he's not saying be miserable and serve the Lord. If it's making you miserable, then maybe you should make yourself a little more happy and serve the Lord.
I think the idea isn't, so when we talk about happiness and joy, sure, there's a semantic range there. We want to have joy in the Lord, but it's not based on me. It's like I need to align myself with what God says. These are things that bring joy. I'm like, right. Yeah, but I want to do this.
If you're sad, depressed, and lonely, your service to the Lord will suffer.
There's definitely something to that, yes. But also, within parameters, right? He says that just how you feel doesn't decide whether something's right or wrong. There is right and wrong, and there's things that aren't available. Yes, okay.
Basically, he says whatever way best to serve.
Right, whatever works for you.
Right. I guess the focus is
making yourself feel
right. The focus is serving the Lord, right? Because we can reverse it and say like, oh, there's serving the Lord and what I want, and how can I take what I want and use that to serve the Lord? Reverses the order. And it's like, oh, well, here's the things that I like. Can I make this service to the Lord? It's like, well, let's start with what is God calling you to, and then align yourself with that, and then how can you do that to the best of your ability is Christ's focus, and it means probably shedding a bit of myself and some of my desires. But yes, probably to a degree.
Yes. We also just talked about, like, if you can't control your loves, get married.
Right.
Yes.
So make yourself happy so that you can serve the Lord.
Yes. Although I struggle with the idea of when I'd say, how can you serve the Lord? The focus, though, I would just lead with serving the Lord. How can I serve the Lord most effectively? And how can I bring my thinking, I say most effectively, not how can I be happy? How can I most effectively serve the Lord? And often, you're happiest when you're effectively serving the Lord. So you could say that, but the focus shouldn't be on my happiness, because that gets very subjective, and then it becomes very me-centered. Well, this is what makes me happy, therefore, God needs to use me like this here. Why? Because that's what makes me happy, and if I'm not doing what makes me happy, then, right? And then it's very me-focused. Daniel?
Your free will is involved here, and you want to give the glory to God, but if God puts you in a position to rightfully serve Him, then I believe that He will provide you with joy and happiness through serving Him.
I agree very much with that. Yes. And again, so thank you, Dan. I would say, yeah, starting with the focus is on serving the Lord, and the joy follows in that, right? Following Jesus brings joy. Yeah, I think you said that very well. I don't need to add to that. Thank you. I should be focusing on what would make me most effective in serving the Lord. Okay. So, there's that. And now he gets into this second part. But the man thinks that he's treating his fiancée improperly and will inevitably give in to his passion. Let him marry her as he wishes. It's not a sin. But if he has decided firmly not to marry and there is no urgency and he can control his passion, he does well not to marry. So the person who marries his fiancée does well, and the person who doesn't marry does even better. We're going to start off real quick. This is another one of those passages. If you look at a different translation, it's going to say a different thing. What it says is, there's no way to know exactly which way to go with this. It says, your virgin is the term. Where in the New Living Translation it says fiancé. The Greek is your virgin. So then the question is, well, what does that mean? The two possible options are, I'll tell you and then I'll read it in the New American Standard Version. It'll show you. In Greco-Roman culture, and in a lot of societies, so an unmarried daughter would fall under the headship of the father. The father is going to take care of this girl. She's going to be under him, and he's going to take her in his household unless he marries her, like she gets married to someone else, and then she becomes her own thing. And so this could be your virgin, could be fathers who have unmarried daughters. This is how to treat you. And that would also move how some of this reads, if that's the context, or if it's someone who's betrothed, which is what makes sense to us. Like, oh yeah, he's talking about a dating type person or that. So I just read it in the New Living Translation. Let me read it for you now with the New American Standard Version, which takes the other side. It says, oh, we think this is talking more about the daughter. I'll read how this goes, and we'll just talk about the two options of how this could be translated, or like what the meaning would be for either. You'll see it's not a big deal, but I just want to put it out there. So when you read through this, you're like, hey, that's not what it said. This is a whole different thing. This is why. Okay, so the New American Standard reads, if any man thinks that he is acting unbecomingly toward his virgin daughter, if she is past her youth, and if it must be so, let him do what he wishes. He does not sin, let her marry. But he who stands firm in his heart, being under no constraint, but has authority over his own will, and has decided in his own heart to keep his own virgin daughter, he will do well. So then, both he who gives his own virgin daughter in marriage does well, and he who does not give her in marriage will do better. Okay, so the two options are, and again, this is one of those, it's just vague. We don't know. There's nothing to point either way. You can say, well, I think this for these reasons. Like, yeah, I think this for these reasons, and there's just no way to know. And people have looked at it, and that's just where it is. So, the marrying off, I already said it, the marrying off or providing for at home of one's unwed daughters was the responsibility of the father. The New American Standard Version, the way it read, would be, what if I can't support my single daughter? So, Paul, you made a good case about how it would be good for my daughters not to marry. That would be a good thing because it would leave them dedicated in service to the Lord, and they'd be provided for, right? They'd be provided for in my household, so all their needs are met, and they can serve the Lord. But what if I can't do that? What if that's too hard for me? What if I got 4 daughters and I'm kind of middle class to poor? I'm not sure I can support my daughters like that. Should I feel guilty? Like, Paul, do I have an obligation as a good Christian father to support my daughters? But it's hard for me. It's like, hey, you're not sinning if your daughter's no longer a child and she's a marriageable age, and you're like, you know what, I really think it'd be better to marry her off because of my life situation. Hey, that's fine. You're not sinning. Let her marry. That would be how that would translate if it was talking with fathers. Hey, let your daughter marry. That's okay. She's going under her husband now, and you're not taking that obligation because that's fine. You can still be a good Christian dad and do that. That's okay. That's an option for you. He says, or he who stands firm in his heart, being under no constraint, but has authority over his own will, and has decided this in his own heart to keep his virgin daughter, he will do well. It's like, hey, but if you're like, you know what, no, I'm dedicating myself to this, and I can support my daughter, and I will take on that, like for the rest of my life, I will be the support for her. Great. You've allowed your daughter to be able to serve in this capacity and still be taken care of. So good for you. You were able to do that. This other guy chose this other thing. That's all right. So that's how that would read if it were translated that. The other way would be a young man betrothed to a woman, but is now considering pursuing a celibate life. That's how the New Living Translation presents it. Hey, you're married, you're not married, you've got this fiancé, you're engaged, but now you're considering, Paul says that there's real value in being married. He says, well, let's consider this then. Do you think that long term you will actually be able to, knowing that your fiancé is there, there's a girl you could marry, but now you're choosing a celibate life, do you think that's something you'll actually be able to maintain long term? Do you think you'll be able to act, I'll just read it. But if a man thinks that he's treating his fiancée improperly and will inevitably give in to his passion, let him marry her as he wishes. It's not a sin. You don't think you can do this long term? Well, don't set yourself up for failure. If he has decided firmly not to marry, there's no urgency, and he can control his passion, he does well not to marry. So the person who marries his fiancée does well, the person who doesn't marry does even better. Again, Paul's bias is there. He's like, they're not the same, right? There's a lack of freedom and mobility when you marry, but that's totally fine, and it makes sense in that context. That's a good thing. If you're not going to be able to stay the course with that, sure, marry her. That's an okay, good thing. Do you think it's a reasonable long-term plan, or are you setting yourself up for failure? That would be the other alternate version. Both translations, though, should be read in light of chapter 7, verse 35. I want you to do whatever will help you serve the Lord best, with as few distractions as possible. That's the deciding factor. As you assess this, there's two roads available. Which one will help you serve the Lord best? That's the question that makes this what we're going for. And that would be, not to go back and get all circumstances, but that would be my issue with how we were talking before. It's not what makes you happy, it's what would help you serve the Lord best. And then, again, joy is found in serving the Lord. So happiness follows as we serve the Lord. But if my focus is on my self-interest and I'm pursuing happiness by making myself happy, if there's no joy to be found there, it's actually in service to the Lord that can be. It's just a focus. So I'd go with that. So what would help you serve the Lord best? And then he finishes in verse 39. A wife is bound to her husband as long as he lives. If her husband dies, she is free to marry anyone she wishes, but only if he loves the Lord. But in my opinion, it would be better for her to stay single. And I think I'm giving you counsel from God's Spirit when I say this. So it's like the third time he said, hey, you've got two options. They're both reasonable options. I do vote single. Like Paul says, he keeps saying it, right? He keeps pushing it. And Mark, I think you brought up a valid point. It's there. He's like, he has a bias. He's saying, hey, this is really valuable. Let me keep saying that. Like, and it's countercultural. The Jews would be like, what are you doing, Paul, telling my daughter or my son not to marry? That's what we do. I was like, well, with an eternal perspective, if they're like, I want to live my life as much for Jesus as I possibly can, marriage actually might be not in their best interest for that. Maybe, right? And there's qualifiers and contingencies and stuff there. But something there. So he says that again. But also he has this thing, a wife, so her husband dies, she's free to marry if she would like. I would say she should consider not marrying, says Paul, but only if he loves the Lord. Right? She should only marry a Christian. So previously, if you recall, last week, Paul had said, hey, if you're married to an unbeliever, don't leave that person. You have a special ministry in their life. They have Jesus living with them in their home right now. Don't divorce that person. If they want to leave you, because they're like, no, I don't want to be with a Jesus freak. I don't want to be a Jesus follower. This is bothering me. Okay, they can leave and you're free to marry. But, believer, you should remain married to an unbeliever. Now he's saying, don't marry an unbeliever. Is that a contradiction?
One is passive, one is active.
Yeah, that's the difference, right? One is making do with what's, hey, you find yourself, right now, okay, I'm married to someone who's not a Christian. It's like, okay, well, the marriage union is something before God. Don't leave that. Now he's saying, okay, now you're a free agent and you can decide who to marry. You need to be considering who you marry. Like, this is a big deal. If you want to, you don't have to turn, I put it down there. Later on, he's going to write to these same people in 2 Corinthians 6, and he's going to say this. 2 Corinthians 6, verse 14. Don't team up, right? Active. Don't go into this type of relationship. Don't team up with those who are unbelievers. How can righteousness be a partner with wickedness? How can light live with darkness? What harmony can there be between Christ and the devil? How can a believer be a partner with an unbeliever? And what union can there be between God's temple and idols? For we are the temple of the living God, as God said. I will live in them and walk among them. I will be their God, and they will be my people. Therefore come out from among unbelievers and separate yourselves from them, says the Lord. Don't touch their filthy rags, and I will welcome you, and I will be your father, and you will be my sons and daughters, says the Lord Almighty. That passage isn't only about marrying people, that it's business stuff. It'd be teaming up with like, hey, can I as a pastor team up with some other religious leader and kind of we'll have this hodgepodge. Like, no, don't unify yourself. Don't intentionally align yourself and join yourself to someone who is not a follower of God. It's like, if you are already in that thing, well, let's try to make the best of it. If you have the choice, no, don't do that. That doesn't make sense. That's inconsistent. You as a child of God should not be pursuing someone who is not a believer. He's like, that doesn't mix. You're trying to mix oil and water. There's already oil and water in the container, and, well, do the best that you can with that situation. Don't try to get into that situation. And he says it explicitly. She's only free to marry if the person loves the Lord. Like, she's not able to just find any guy. Like, hey, but I want someone to fill my needs. I want someone to make me happy. I don't want to be alone, and so this guy will do it. No, only if the person is a follower of Jesus. That's a limiting factor there.
Correct.
So the question, well, what if by marrying an unbeliever, I'm able to have a unique ministry in his life? What if I can fix him? What about that? Right? That's the question. Like, the slim pickings. Yeah, but what if I take the principle that you said earlier, Paul, of if someone is already in that marriage union, what if I take that and I intentionally enter into that union for the same? He's like, take it and answer this question. I want you to do whatever will help you serve the Lord best with as few distractions as possible.
Amen.
Is that the answer?
No.
God, I could be single and serve you 100%, or I could join myself to someone who is not your child and the Bible defines it as a child of Satan. Someone who cannot walk with you, who cannot serve you, who cannot love you at this point in your life. It's a no-brainer. No. Being single is the better way to serve than joining yourself with an unbeliever intentionally. It doesn't make sense. I want you to do whatever will help you serve the Lord best with as few distractions as possible. For this lady whose husband has died, she can be single and serve the Lord. She can marry a believer and serve the Lord together. But she can't marry an unbeliever. It doesn't move in that direction. That's what Paul would say there. That's the obvious answer of that thing. And again,
I said ideally, we should stay with our people.
Yeah, that's the idea. And it's like there's the thing. It's like, oh, but I fell away and I was making my decisions and I married, like I have married this person. Okay, well, binding contract, yes. But that's not ideal. You don't intentionally, I'm going to, in service to the Lord, marry this person who believes in God, and I'm gonna serve the Lord in this capacity. Don't pretend you're moving towards Christ-likeness in this. That's a selfish decision that you're making, not in service to the Lord. Because there's no way that moves you in service to the Lord. In the same way that the singleness is that he's talking about, or the marriage with a believer. And I already mentioned, again, we see Paul putting great value in a single believer remaining single so they can wholeheartedly serve the Lord. He finishes the thing with that. In my opinion, it's better if the lady stays single, but sure, if you want to marry another Christian, do that. So, 7:17, each of you should continue to live in whatever situation the Lord has placed you and remain as you were when God first called you. You can serve the Lord faithfully in whatever situation you are currently in. Except the sinful situation. It's like, hey, here's living with your girlfriend, and no, that's not a thing that's sexual immorality. You're not serving the Lord. So not that stuff. But you can be married, you can be single, and making that work. Yes, you can serve the Lord faithfully in whatever situation you're in. And then in 7:35, I'm saying for your benefit, not a personal restriction, I want you to do whatever will help you serve the Lord best with as few distractions as possible. Consider carefully how you might best steward the life you've been given. And he said, for single people, for married people, for all those situations, that's what we want to be asking. So if you're asking that, that's a good question, Corinthians. That's the question you need to be bringing in each of these situations. And there's going to be varying answers, like within their church, within any group of people. Hey, what's best for this person in this stage of life, in this context, with these passions or whatever? How does this work? It's going to be different answers. Right? It's not a hard and fast. It's not, let me tell you. But are there considerations that definitely apply for all believers? Yeah, there's definitely considerations here. It's not like, I'll just do whatever I want. No. Paul's like, that's not what I said. I didn't say do whatever you want. I said, here's the questions to be answering. Can you answer them truthfully before the Lord? And I'd say in a context of believers, that's why the church is here to help us navigate. I mentioned last week that a young single guy had come to Rochelle and I, and he was saying, hey, I'm single, thinking about this. Here's the context I plan on going into. What do you guys think? You've lived in that context. You've seen how this works. And we were like, yeah, and I already said it last week, but for a single guy to go and live in a remote jungle village amongst people who are all getting married, it's like you're going to be attracting the attention of all the young ladies who really want to marry the young rich American. Everyone's going to be suspicious of why is this single guy here, like what he couldn't, because we find like marriage is a pretty universal thing. Like that's what people do. They at least connect up. It's like, okay, so you're not. Why are you here? So there's going to be suspicion, and just the track record is pretty rough. As far as single guys, often there's passions involved, and it's a very difficult thing. Like, hey, here's things to consider. So he was like, man, yeah, you're right. It seems like probably marriage would be a better route, a better thing for me to serve the Lord effectively in the context that I'm looking to go. There's also there's some single women in the same thing. They're like, hey, you know what? I am able to like dedicate myself to translation work, and there's so many stories of women that are able to make this work, and just like serve the Lord so faithfully single. And they're like, you know what? I'm able to let some of that stuff go and do this. But also in our context, there are a lot of women that it was really hard for them because areas they couldn't go safely because the single lady just can't do things. She's like, no, if I was married, it'd be a lot easier to like function within this village and within this context. And yet Paul presents there's certainly situations where it is way better to be single than married. There's things you can do. Like him, I can go to a city, I can get beat to death, and then run away in the middle of the night, and I can do that all without having to talk to anybody or gather my kids. Or he's like, there's stuff I can do that married guys can't. It's too hard. I'm able to do it at a pace that a married guy couldn't keep up with. And he says that in another passage. Like, I'm surpassing my peers. Look at the other apostles; they have their wives with them, but I'm kind of doing more, right? Because I'm single. He says here. So stuff to consider. Paul getting into the nitty-gritty of life, like this is real life stuff he's talking about with them. Any other short